Hey everybody. I was surprised that so many of you enjoyed my Omaha poker video. So I decided that what I'm going to do over the next few months, probably do this when I'm able to move to my house in Oregon, is I'm going to do a whole series on Hold'em poker strategy, also known as Texas Hold'em poker strategy. You know, Texas Hold'em is the game where you have 2 cards in your hand and 5 come up on the board that are common to everyone. And there are 4 betting rounds or streets, okay? But this is just an introduction, talking about what I intend to do for my series. For those of you who have limited knowledge of poker, I'm sure that the Kenny Rogers song gives you all the wisdom you need, knowing when to hold them and knowing when to fold them, most particularly. But, there are some more facets to the game besides just those things. In fact, I don't necessarily agree with Kenny on everything in his song. For example, not counting your money at the table. While it's true that you wouldn't sit and count it out to determine your win and so forth, the fact is, these days, you should know how many chips are in front of you and how many are in front of your opponents, at least have a rough idea. And that's particularly true in tournament poker. But in any case, Kenny had some good thoughts in his song. That refrigerator is going to make a loud noise, just like it does every time I start one of these videos. But before it makes the loud noise, let's get a deck of cards and I'll go into some of what we're going to do. Do you ever notice with a new deck, they have this saran wrap on them, or whatever this is, and you can never figure, they have this little line here that you can peel it off, but I can never figure out where that begins. Do you have any idea? I can never figure that out. You can't tell. Wait, I think I might have found it. Oh, I did. It's a miracle. I almost never can figure that out, and I end up having to bite the cellophane or something. This is a pack of, a new pack I'm opening just for you. Just to illustrate a couple of things. Silver City cards. Notice they have a Queen of Hearts on the back. Speaking of poker songs, do you remember that song by the Eagles? Desperado? And one of the lines is, "Don't you play the King of Diamonds, boy. She'll beat you if she's able. You know the Queen of Hearts is always your best friend." Or is it best bet? Always your best bet, I think. I'm going to have to look that up now. I made myself curious what the line says exactly, but of course the symbolic message in that, if you don't get the symbolic message, I'm not going to tell you. Okay, so poker these days is not played with jokers anymore, so we almost always pull those out of the deck right away. Back in the days of draw poker, okay, yeah, then it was played with jokers. But here's the sound of cards being shuffled. I used to have a friend at and his wife, we would play spades, and she would say, instead of shuffle, she would say mix the cards. You know, I always thought that was kind of a cute phrase. I'm mixing the cards right now. Okay, and you can hear it. Although I don't have the camera pointed down at the moment for you to see it. Anyway, some of what we'll talk about in Texas Hold'em is, for example, let me get a couple of sample hands, starting hands here for you. I will pull out the two best, well, a couple of the best hands. The most powerful hand in Texas Hold'em is considered two aces. So you'll often see that in illustrations about poker, tournament poker, and things like that. Especially the ace of spades is always considered, you know, that's the premium card. Why people like that one the best, I don't know, but it's considered the most powerful ace. It's psychological. There's another connotation to it, but I'm not going to tell you what that is. Okay, now, in the series that I'm going to do, we're going to talk, for example, about why this hand right here might be frequently an easier hand to play out through the hand than this hand, even though this one is the best and most powerful starting hand. It's true, I'd rather see this than this as my first two cards, but just barely, okay? So, especially in tournament poker, in the earlier stages in particular, if you're at the final table and it's short-handed, then I'd much rather see this than this, but, you know, we will discuss that and many other things in the upcoming series. You know why I like this game so much? There are a lot of reasons. A lot of people say that poker is gambling, and a lot of other people say, no, it's a game of skill. This is an ongoing debate amongst both players and observers of the game, as well as legislators who think it's strictly gambling and told us we can't do it online anymore, which is kind of sad because I was a profitable online player before it got banned in the United States. I had books like this, Killer Poker Online, which is adapted specifically to how to play online poker the most effectively to be profitable. I'm hoping it will make a comeback someday. But one of the things I like about poker, back to the gamble versus game of skill debate, is that it's got some of both, okay? It is a game of skill, totally a game of skill. It's about math. It's about reading your opponent. It's about deductive reasoning. It's about being analytical. It's about being competitive and strategic and knowing the strategies. It's about evolving to the game, the hand, the circumstances, and the other players. It's about the economy of understanding how your chip value changes in a tournament as you progress to higher and higher levels. It's about understanding a whole myriad of other things that we will discuss in the series on strategy. This is what makes it a fascinating game. Is it a game of skill? absolutely, the best players at this game are going to consistently take down the money. And that's how the game is scored. Chips, which convert themselves into money. Chips are also called checks at the higher limit levels, like in Baccarat and things, It's just another term for chips. And they're just a stand-in for money. Just like our worthless paper currency is a stand-in for money. It represents money. Okay, so although I would rather have a nice, shiny gold Krugerrand, I think, in my hand than, a few pieces of paper. But, you can't use a shiny Krugerrand to go buy things at Walmart or Safeway, or pay your insurance bill, or use the automated gas pump at the 76 station, can you? It's a little difficult. So, for you gold hoarders out there, hey, that's a topic for a different video, okay? I'm with you, but I'm going to call out some of the nonsense at the same time on a different video. Anyway, see how we always stray, always off topic. I'm going to talk about the fundamentals of poker in my first in the series that I'll do. Some of the basics you should know about poker etiquette and poker strategy and that kind of thing. And then we'll go topic by topic. We'll go with starting hand values versus table position. We'll talk about bluffing, when to do it and when not to do it. We'll talk about stretching yourself into areas that are uncomfortable, forcing yourself to do things uncharacteristic of your personality. And that goes both ways. It goes in the direction of being far more disciplined than you're used to, by saying, I'm going to fold a lot of hands that I desperately want to play. But that's on the side of being more conservative and disciplined than what you want to be. But on the flip side, if you don't have a super aggressive type A personality, in poker, you have to force yourself to sometimes emulate that kind of personality. You have to boldly raise when you have a hand worthy of that bold raise based on conditions. And sometimes that raise will be a stone cold bluff. If you never bluff in poker, you cannot be a consistent winner, let me just say. At least you could be a break-even player, or maybe a very small winner by being a super tight player who just plays correct basic strategy. But you'll never win in tournament poker, for example, if you're too timid. So, or if you're, too undisciplined. You need a variety of skill sets, and you have to constantly evolve and change. In the poker world, it's called changing gears. You have a tight table image 1 minute and a loose, wild image the next, depending on the circumstances of the game and who your opponents are. So, what I love about the game is it is a game of skill, but I don't agree with those who say it's not gambling. It is a gamble. You could have the ace. No, let's make a better analogy. Let's pick a couple of cards here. Let's say you've got in your hand, in your starting hand, you have the 10 jack of spades, right? And on the board, what comes on the board are cards like this. This is what came in your hand, 10 jack of spades. This is what you see on the board that's also in your hand and everyone else's. King, queen, 10, okay? You have a pair of 10s, right? But you have 4 cards to an open-ended royal flush, okay? Or an open-ended straight flush, I should say. One of which makes a royal flush. If the ace of spades comes, this is your hand, this is the board, you're going to make a royal flush if the ace of spades comes. If a 9 of spades comes, you're going to make a straight flush. If any spade comes, you're going to make a flush. If a 10 comes, you're going to have 3 10s. So you have all kinds of different, and of course you can make a variety of straights. If any ace or 9 comes, right, you can make straights. So you look at a hand like this and you say, wow, I've got a pair already, and I've got all kinds of great potential to improve my hand. But it's a gamble, isn't it? It is a gamble. So both elements exist in the game of poker. The trick is to know when to gamble and when to not gamble. When to put in bets in the hopes that you'll make your hand, and when to be more conservative. If I had a hand like that, and I had 3 crazy opponents making big bets, I would love to get as much money into the pot as possible, even though the odds of me making my great giant hand are still against me. Because if I make my hand, I'm going to make so much money on it that the pot is giving me proper odds to get as much money in there as possible against those weak, loose opponents. So that's why there's both gamble and skill involved, right? And we'll talk more about that. We're going to distill in the series things like this very excellent book, Small Stakes Hold'em, so that if you want to be a beginner and go play in a local casino in a small limit Texas Hold'em game like 3-6, I'll explain that later what that means, or 4-8, for example, or even I don't think many casinos spread a 1-2 or a 2-4 much anymore, but even some do, I think, in Vegas, right? We'll talk about that. How to win at small stakes, because that's how you begin. That's your beginning point. If you find you're very good at the game, you have the right skill set, the right math abilities, the right people reading skills, the ability to do things you're uncomfortable with, like bluff, or the ability to rein in your bluffing instinct if you're a wild, aggressive player, then your starting point is here. And later you can play no limit hold'em or tournaments or higher stakes limit. But we'll go through the strategies and concepts in books like this. I have several books that we can discuss, and I can distill out the concepts in those books into layman's language, so that if you're not interested in poker, you can just go to sleep listening to me talk about it while I ruffle the chips and shuffle the cards, okay, and discuss it. If you're a beginner to the game, my series will be very helpful to you if you don't want to read a lot of books, okay? If you're an intermediate to very good player, I'll have value in my series for you in the respect that it's always very good to go back and review the basics, because our human nature is to drift too far into that part of us that's undisciplined and wants to gamble. Okay, generally speaking, I'm saying. And we have to rein that in constantly. Because another thing I'm going to explain to you, for example, is that if you've been sitting at the table for an hour, seeing nothing but rag hands, rags means terrible hands that you should never play. Rags are hands like this, right? Hands that you should never play. And suddenly you wake up and you find a hand like this dealt to you. And you're the first to act right after the big blind. You're going to say, wow, great, a playable hand at last. But if it's a tight, aggressive game with good players, you should not be playing this hand in early position. You should only play it if you're in late position, what's called on the button, or 1 or 2 to the right of the button. Okay, in the so we'll explain all that later in a more simplified format that everyone will understand, using actual cards and chips like I did in the Omaha tutorial, but we'll go far more into detail, one concept at a time. We'll talk about bluffs. When should you do them? How should you do them? When should you refrain from doing them? Like I mentioned, bluffing is very important to the game, but you have to know how to be judicious about when to employ that strategy and tactic. You don't want your opponent, in tournament poker, for example, if you never bluff, you can't win at the higher levels and the later stages, because your opponents will have read you. They'll know that you never bluff. So every time you make a sizable bet, if they don't have a monster hand, they're going to fold. And so you're not going to get good chips when you make a big bet. You're not going to get big pots. You're going to lose some pots, and you're only going to win a little bit in others. And so it's a losing strategy to say, I'm only going to bet big when I have a big hand. Sometimes you have to bluff, okay? We're going to talk about some of the great players and what they do. Like one of my favorite guys, Daniel Negreanu. I like this guy because he's not only a brilliant poker player who has won gold bracelets in the World Series of Poker, but he's also a genuinely nice guy. Unlike some of the others, the villains out there we all love to hate, like Phil Hellmuth, for example. Phil is such a big baby, okay? He whines and complains when a weaker hand beats him because they get their miracle card on the river. He bitches and moans and berates other players. And so he's a villain in most poker circles. I remember playing with Phil. I went on something called the Party Poker Million Cruise. I won a couple of entries to this cruise in online satellite tournaments, and a lot of poker pros came because they wanted to take money from us laymen, us amateur online players, right? So I didn't lose money on the cruise. I didn't make money in the tournament itself. I got knocked out at 28th or something. Um, I think the field was 140 or something. I can't recall. So I didn't quite make it in the money. But I did make money in side games. And because I won 2 entries in primary satellite tournaments leading up to it, I was able to sell one of those entries to Johnny Chan, another famous poker pro, for $8,000. The entry fee was $10,000. So I gave him a discount because he could just buy his own way in if he wanted to spend 10 grand. I had to discount that extra entry, but that meant I made a profit of 8K before even going, and plus they threw in the whole cruise for free for 2 people and some spending money. So it was a good deal. There's another interruption. Anyway, Phil got to the final table, Phil Hellmuth, and after he got knocked out, rather than graciously thanking his opponents, he went over and stood against the wall, back to the wall, right behind the final table, and slowly slid down it and put his head in his hands like it was the end of his life, right? It was rather humorous in a way. But anyway, the personalities in poker are fascinating. We will also go into things like poker essays, distilling out some of the best stuff from this collection of articles in here by famous and expert poker players who have published in magazines and books. And one thing I'm looking forward to in our future series is getting into this book, because it's got lots of color illustrations, and I like pictures, so because as a small-brained creature, I have to have something interesting to look at. And, it's got pictures of the famous players and the venues and, Vegas and all that kind of thing. So this is called Ace on the River, an advanced poker guide. I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it. How to behave in the poker society, for example. There's an etiquette involved with poker. But one of the great things, I'll just close with this, since I'm talking about why I like the game. When you walk into a poker room and sit down at the table, we are all totally equal. All that matters is our play. It doesn't matter our background or ethnicity or religion or cultural heritage or status or station in life, what we have materially, what educational background we have. Those might be a factor in what produces a good player, but you have an equal chance at the table with everyone else if you can outplay your opponents. Doesn't matter where you came from or anything else. You might be a brilliant poker player with no formal educational credential. In fact, many of the best players dropped out of college when they found out they were so good at poker that they could do better playing professionally than getting that law degree. Okay, that's going to be like one person in 10,000. So don't run out and think you're going to become a poker pro. You'll see what I mean if you go start butting heads with some of the better players at the game. pitting your skills against theirs. But the game is fascinating, it's fun, it's an equalizer, it's a people game, even for someone like me, who's not a people person really. This affords me a chance to study people in an interested way, because when I'm playing in a tournament, for example, and I'm getting no good hands, I'm busy every moment studying every one of my opponents, looking for tells, the psychology that they use, what are they doing and why, and that makes it always interesting instead of boring. Some guys sit there with their cell phone the whole time, messing around at the poker table. You can see them, they're all distracted. Those are good players to take stacks from, because that means they're just not focused on their game. For me, it is interesting, even when I'm not in a hand, to study everything going on. So that's it for our intro to the future series, except for this sip of water. Until then, don't ASMR and drive, and don't listen to ASMR on your headphones when you're playing poker live at the table. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye for now.